Not this week. Let's take a quick shower. Do that.
Oh. All right, quiet on the set. I'm about to start recording it. You heard me?
Yes, hold on. And you should.
What's good? What's good? It's your boy JLucas Nutrition, here to give you a little information about my InsideTracker results, a platform that allows you to make an assessment of your blood parameters to see what your nutritional status might look like. I had my results done back in November around Thanksgiving time when my family was visiting me here in Dallas, Texas. I can remember it being a nice time to have my mom, dad, sister, her 2 kids, and my brother-in-law here at my 2-bedroom apartment. I did have to sleep on the couch, so that did lead to some restless nights, but it was all love in the end. But we'll see how some of those parameters may have influenced some of my lab results. So let's take a look. So InsideTracker basically takes a look inside. A lot of times we often hear people talking about different diets, nutritional regimens, and we see that by making a modification in their diet and their exercise regimen, people usually see a change in their body composition, or we see that there's a change in the appearance of the outside. But how about within? What does the mechanics of the body look like? How is your body working metabolically? And what potential risk factors might you have that may indicate maybe poor performance, or perhaps more risk for disease down the line, or other factors that may just have an influence on your ability to optimize with your life? So generally, I've had a full panel lab analysis conducted through InsideTracker, and they basically are different from your doctor's office because they take a lot of different blood parameters. For example, you'll note that they check your testosterone level, they check your albumin, your sodium, potassium, C-reactive protein, white blood cells, et cetera, et cetera. Not that you can't get these labs done through your physician. You can, but what makes InsideTracker unique is that it tells you where your levels fall in relation to your age, your gender, your athletic performance, or any type of physical activity you might be doing, and also looking at what's necessary for optimization for general life and longevity. And it provides a value for where you should be at in order to be able to optimize on your potential. So we see we have several different markers here, and I'll give you the results accordingly. So first off, we'll start with the first marker, which would be hemoglobin. And with hemoglobin, what we note is that my level was very low, 13.1 grams per deciliter. There were about 5 markers that were particularly low that kind of raised a red flag to consult your doctor about your iron marker level. Hemoglobin is basically a molecule that carries oxygen throughout your body. And you'll see here, it has a suggestion for eating more foods that may help with improving the hemoglobin level. Right now, I'm at 13.1 grams per deciliter, but it's suggesting that my optimal level is between 14.9 to up to 18 grams per deciliter. So it's suggesting here that I eat beef outside of round steak, octopus, and sorry, that won't be happening. Oysters, I don't really eat oysters much. Beef bottom round steak. If you follow me on Instagram, JLucas Nutrition, you'll find that I eat a lot of beef and red meats, probably more than ever since I've been living in Texas. So I don't think that is eating these foods per se that's a problem. It's something a little bit more of a challenge metabolically. It's something that I am trying to figure out and discover more of. I've actually did consult my doctor about this level, but he wasn't concerned about it. But it will be interesting to check my levels again. Another factor here you'll see, it says to improve hemoglobin levels, incorporate adequate rest periods during or following training and competition. And again, remember I was mentioning that I was sleeping on the couch and probably wasn't getting the best of sleep at the time. So my rest period between workouts may have been influenced, but I think it's a little bit more deeper than just that. Another factor it mentions is to avoid performance impairments and reduce hemoglobin concentrations, avoid donating blood. I haven't donated blood in maybe a couple years, so that didn't have anything to do with it. The next thing it mentions is to increase hemoglobin levels naturally, train in a high altitude location before an athletic competition. Now, living in Dallas, Texas, I'm not sure what the altitude is, but I can tell you that I'm not getting in the hypoxic, levels of oxygen circulating around that would stimulate, the bone marrow to start making more red blood cells. So that's not going to happen. But maybe if I can visit some friends in Denver, Colorado, give me a shout out so I can get my hemoglobin levels up. So the interesting thing is here is that I'm a part of 3% of InsideTracker users who have a low level of hemoglobin. 80% of InsideTracker users have an optimal level of hemoglobin. So this is kind of concerning for me. And I won't lie, sometimes I feel tired, but I have such an intensity to fight every day that I find that this is not a factor for me. But imagine if I was able to get this hemoglobin level up to optimal levels. So a little bit more on hemoglobin. It is the iron-containing oxygen transporter in the red blood cells. Its primary function is to carry oxygen from the lungs to the muscles, brain, and digestive system, where it releases the oxygen for cell use. Hemoglobin also plays a role in removing carbon dioxide from the cells and returning it to the lungs. Low hemoglobin levels may increase fatigue, while at the same time reducing energy, the body's capacity to use oxygen during exercise, VO2 max, and overall endurance. Increased risk of anemia, low red blood cell count, and poor temperature regulation also correlate with very low hemoglobin. No problems with temperature regulation, I can tell you that. I feel pretty normal in the environments that I'm in, unless I would randomly feel cold in this very hot environment here in Dallas, but so far so good. So symptoms of low hemoglobin can include paleness, weakness, fatigue, palpitations, issues with regulating body temperature, low energy and skin numbness or tingling. I'm not quite sure. I don't think I fall into those particular symptoms. Maybe some fatigue here and there, but it's kind of hard to tell between sleep deprivation and actual true fatigue. There is a correlation between low hemoglobin and lower VO2 max, an indicator of endurance capacity and of physical fitness. Average hemoglobin, hematocrit, and transferrin saturation tend to be lower in African Americans than in Caucasians, independent of iron levels. I am African American, so perhaps that could have some slight influence, but if anybody has any insight on that, please feel free to send me an email at jlucasnutrition@gmail.com. Male endurance athletes who lose blood through injury or blood donation may have decreased hemoglobin levels, which can compromise their athletic performance. And symptoms of low hemoglobin can include, again, paleness, weakness, fatigue, palpitations, issues with regulating body temperature. That is repetitive, and I apologize. So transferrin saturation, TS, iron binding level. So apparently my iron binding level was 80% off the chart. The optimal zone is between 22 to 17. So really, I don't know what's going on here, but there's something going array with my iron, hemoglobin, concentration, and these particular levels. Again, I shared these results with my doctor, but he was not concerned about it. And I will be getting another test hopefully sometime soon so I can see if there's been any adjustments. Of course, you know, from a diet perspective, I feel like I eat well. I probably eat cottage cheese at least every 2 weeks. Pork loin, I have some pork probably every 2 weeks as well. Rockfish, I don't eat that. Mackerel, I don't eat that either. Excuse me, but I'm sure there's a few others in this list that I do consume. Again, I was a part of 8% of InsideTracker users who have high levels of TS, but 27% of InsideTracker users have optimal levels. Hey, those of you who have optimal levels, let me know. Is there something that I'm missing that you do to help improve my levels? So what the heck is transferrin saturation? Let's take a deeper look at this one. Transferrin saturation is your serum iron divided by the total iron binding capacity, which is the maximum amount of iron that your blood can carry. Transferrin saturation indicates how much iron is actually bound by the protein transferrin. The human body requires iron to perform many vital physiological functions. For instance, iron is the key component of hemoglobin, which allows red blood cells to transport oxygen throughout the body. Your body takes in iron from the food you eat, so it is important to have good sources of iron in your diet. Iron enters the body through the small intestine, and it is either bound to ferritin and stored, or goes into the bloodstream attached to the protein transferrin, which aids in transporting iron to tissues throughout the body. Transferrin also prevents iron from promoting the production of damaging free radicals in the body. High transferrin saturation can indicate that your overall iron is high, which can leave you feeling tired and weak and can cause abdominal and joint pain. I'm not particularly noticing the abdominal or joint pain, but obviously my transferrin levels are high and my iron levels are high as well, as we'll see coming up soon. So again, something metabolically is not going right. But I would have never known this if I never did take this InsideTracker results. So, you know, more to the story is, you know, don't go off based off your feeling or, you know, based on what you're eating. You can get a small assessment, have your labs checked, you know, go to your doctor, have the InsideTracker results to get a better assessment. So again, what we see here is that my iron blood levels are really high. Again, kind of odd. You know, I do eat a lot of these iron-rich foods, tuna, yogurt every once in a while, a lot of heme iron sources from meat, fish, chicken, poultry. So my levels are elevated, and it should be between 104 to 78. So more investigation and insight on this one. Again, anybody that may have some information on this, please let me know. If only 5%, it's pretty weird, of InsideTracker users who have a high level of iron. 37% of InsideTracker users have an optimal level of iron. So what is iron? The human body requires iron to perform many vital physiological functions. When we breathe, how are we going to capture the oxygen molecules that are within the air? Well, that's where iron comes into play. The iron captures the oxygen and attaches it to the red blood cell to then carry it around the body. That's what the hemoglobin's for. And then it transports it to tissues like your muscle, and the myoglobin then takes the oxygen from the hemoglobin and uses it for performance of activity. For instance, iron is the key component of hemoglobin, which allows red blood cells to transport oxygen throughout the body. Your body takes in iron from the food you eat, so it's important to have good sources of iron in your diet. Only about 10% of the iron you consume is absorbed. The process of iron absorption is tightly regulated because your body does not have any biochemical ways of removing iron. Instead, iron is lost through processes such as bleeding, menstruation, and breastfeeding. Additionally, iron within the body is constantly being recycled and reused. The body stores excess iron in the liver, heart, and pancreas. And high levels of iron can poison these organs. High levels of iron can cause your levels of blood sugar to rise. So far, my blood sugars are in line. There's no elevations or indications for pre-diabetes, but let's take a closer look so that we can have more certainty. So here we have my glucose levels are 85, which for me, I would think that's a pretty daggone good fasting blood sugar level. If it's over 100, it gives an indication for pre-diabetes. And if it's above 126, that pretty much gives a high indication when fasted that there can be some glucose mismanagement and risk for diabetes down the line. Of course, you'd also want to have a hemoglobin A1C checked to get a better assessment of your risk for diabetes. But ultimately, for optimization, it's suggesting blood sugars be between 80 to 65. What are some foods you can eat that may help with blood sugar control? Navy beans, which this one came up for me a few times. White beans, those are actually beans that I've never tried. So maybe I can start incorporating those somehow. Wheat germ, I started adding that in maybe the first 3 months of the new year here, but I ran out. We have some other type of beans here and some pinto beans, very low glycemic index food. It also indicates that to reduce fasting glucose levels, increase the fiber in your diet, aim to include at least one source of fiber in each meal. I always try to make sure that my fruit and vegetable intake particularly is adequate, particularly non-starchy vegetables, as that's where you can get a lot of fiber from. And I also have added that psyllium fiber to my diet, about a tablespoon a day. That one really helps out a lot as well. Additionally, consider being a time-restricted feeding regimen or alternate day fasting regimen. So, generally maybe waiting 4 hours in between each meal to allow carbohydrate digestion to take place. Also, to increase your HDL cholesterol and lower your fasting glucose, consider taking 100 milligrams of a garlic supplement daily for at least 12 weeks. It's pretty interesting. Well, I guess I'd have to cover that with a little gum, but ultimately, I don't think I need to take it to that level quite yet. Incorporate at least 1 serving of nuts per day. I love nuts. I eat nuts every day, mixed nuts. Definitely a go-to snack. Really, I started to catch on to snacking on nuts a little bit more frequently when reading Arnold's book about his training regimen and how he would snack on cashews whenever he would get hungry in between meals. So feel free to choose cashews or some other nuts, almonds, to help control appetite, which can also help to control blood sugars. So we have a little video, a little bit more information on glucose. Let's check it out.
Glucose is a monosaccharide or simple sugar found in carbohydrate-containing foods. When we discuss glucose as a biomarker, we are talking about glucose levels in the blood, which you will often hear referred to as blood sugar. Blood glucose is our body's preferred source of fuel. That is why it is ideal to keep glucose within the optimal range. Maintaining optimal blood glucose levels is important for proper metabolic function in the body. When glucose is optimized, you will have more energy, improved blood pressure, and better weight control compared to when glucose is out of range. When glucose is below the optimal zone, you are at risk of rapid heartbeat, nausea, extreme hunger, headache, and tingling and numbness in the lips and fingertips. When glucose is above the optimal zone, you are at risk of developing type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, which are both characterized by uncontrolled blood glucose levels. You are also at risk of weight gain and elevated blood pressure, cholesterol, and triglycerides. There are several ways to optimize your glucose levels. You can increase fiber and decrease sugar intake. You can also increase your weekly physical activity. Regular exercise is especially important for anyone with elevated glucose. To optimize glucose, you should add high fiber foods to your diet. These include whole fruits, specifically berries, vegetables, and whole grains. Juices, however, should not be added to the diet to increase fiber intake. Juice and other sugar-sweetened beverages like soda increase glucose levels. Other things to consider in choosing foods to improve glucose are glycemic index and glycemic load. Glycemic index assesses the body's blood glucose response to food. This response varies based on the fiber, sugar, protein, fat, and other nutrients in the food. Glycemic index accounts for the carbohydrate quality of a food. But if you also want to consider the amount of carbohydrate in a standard serving of the food, you should learn more about the food's glycemic load. Glycemic load accounts for the quality and quantity of carbohydrate in a food. Choose foods that are low in glycemic index and, more importantly, glycemic load. If you have elevated glucose levels, you can use exercise to moderate your glucose levels. Exercise improves the insulin sensitivity of cells. Basically, cells are better at removing glucose from the bloodstream and using it for fuel. Remember these key facts about glucose. Glucose is the body's primary source of fuel. High fiber foods help to control glucose levels. Glycemic index and glycemic load can be useful to your understanding of how foods will influence your glucose levels. Exercise increases the uptake of glucose at the cellular level.
Excellent. So there's a little bit more information about blood sugar levels, something that we should aim to control over time. Definitely helps with reducing the risk for disease and, of course, the risk for developing diabetes. So let's get back to my results from InsideTracker. Next up, what we have is a little more information on my glucose results. Notice that I am a part of 65% of InsideTracker users who have a normal level of glucose. So that's great. Now, we already discussed a little bit about blood sugar, but just to remind us and help us to become more of an expert at what glucose is about, it's the body's primary source of energy, which, we have a lot of different diets out there, such as, say, ketogenic, low carb, etc. Our bodies have to go through other adaptive processes so that it can use secondary sources of energy, such as fats and protein, in order to optimize. But know that we do have the natural chemistry to use glucose as our primary preferred energy source. So this type of sugar comes from digesting carbohydrates into a chemical that we can easily convert to energy. Now, this comes back to all carbohydrates converting to the energy that the body recognizes, which is glucose. So it doesn't matter if you consume sugar, apples, fruits, even some vegetables, et cetera, et cetera. If it has carbohydrates, the ultimate, form of molecule that it's going to develop into is glucose. So whether we have a higher concentration of the glucose or a smaller concentration, it's all going to break down to the same thing. But of course, you want to choose those more wholesome, low glycemic index, high fiber, nutrient rich, glucose containing foods to support your health over time. If fasting glucose levels are somewhat high, you are more likely to gain weight and to have higher levels of triglycerides, which are fats. And that goes back to the point I was making about the types of carbohydrates you choose. Carbohydrates aren't bad for you. There's actually a lot of very, very healthy carbohydrates, which primarily are going to come from like your fruits, your vegetables, beans, high fiber foods, etc. When we're consuming more of those foods, it keeps us more full, helps with regulating blood sugars over time. But if we're choosing a lot of those low, simple, refined carbohydrate foods like chips, candy, cake, juices, large amounts of carbohydrates from breads, pasta, cereals, etc., that's where we're going to get excessive elevated glucose levels over time, which is going to cause weight gain in addition to increasing the triglyceride levels. It may be harder to maintain healthy blood sugars, blood pressure, if you have high glucose levels. Next up, looking at inflammation. Here, what we see is that my marker indicates that I need work from an inflammatory perspective. So there's some foods that I can consume that may help. Avocados, I might eat those maybe once a month, maybe twice a month, but I would like to add them more frequently into my diet. Granola, absolutely love granola, but it's super rich in carbohydrates. So sometimes I have a hard time selecting that food. I'd say every 2 months I'll buy like some granola cereal, but no, it has like, I think 200 calories for a half a cup. So if I want to like put on a little weight, you know, a little gain, I'll definitely choose some granola cereal there. Wheat germ, as mentioned, I had added some of that to shakes, yogurt, things of that nature. To moderately reduce white blood cells, consume 1 to 2 alcoholic drinks per day. I don't drink alcohol every day. I would say every once in a while, maybe like once every 2 weeks, I'll have maybe 4 drinks, you know, night out, hanging out. I'm young, you know, I like to think I'm still young and want to have fun just like anyone else. To avoid elevations in white blood cells, ensure adequate sleep. Now that is where I'd say at times I definitely have some changes. Avoid acute sleep restrictions, less than 4 hours of sleep in a night. That can definitely influence the inflammatory factors. To lower white blood cell count and decrease inflammation, consume a Mediterranean diet, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, I'm sure. So generally, I'm part of 16% of InsideTracker users who have a normal level of white blood cells. 74% of InsideTracker users have an optimal level. Now we'll look at high sensitivity C-reactive protein. My level shows that it's in an optimal zone, which is great. You don't want to have a high C-reactive protein level. Basically, C-reactive protein is a high sensitivity C-reactive protein test, measures CRP, which is a marker of inflammation throughout the body. When the C-reactive protein test shows optimal levels, which is less than 1 milligram per deciliter, the amount of inflammation in the body is very low. Optimal CRP levels appear to be an effective predictor of healthy heart, circulatory system, blood pressure, and blood glucose. The CRP test is very sensitive to the amount of CRP in the body, and therefore a better indicator of inflammation than the ordinary CRP test. So I have good CRP levels, which is great, 58%. And we'll take a quick look at a little video for a little more explanation about CRP.
CRP is the abbreviation for C-reactive protein. It is a marker of inflammation in the body. The body uses inflammation as a defense mechanism against infection. However, when the body is not fending off foreign invaders, inflammation should be absent. CRP is one of several indicators of the inflammatory state of the body. When CRP is within the optimal zone, you have better health and quality of life. It is also important to reduce inflammation, the risk of metabolic syndrome, and the risk of type 2 diabetes. CRP's optimal range goes to 0, so there are no risks associated with CRP below the optimal zone. In fact, the lower CRP is, the better. When CRP is above the optimal zone, you are at risk of low bone mineral density, impaired immune system, and worsened cardiovascular health. To improve your CRP levels, you can add certain foods to your diet, lose weight if you are overweight, or quit smoking if you are a smoker. There are a wide variety of foods and beverages that help to improve CRP levels. Some of these include grapes, berries, nuts, garlic, black and green tea, vinegar, and olive oil. Exercise can be extremely beneficial for your CRP levels, especially when it occurs regularly and at moderate intensity. Inconsistent exercise seems to have a negative effect on CRP levels. Try to stick to an exercise schedule to optimize your CRP. When you have a scheduled blood test, you should participate in a lighter exercise routine the day before and no exercise the day of. This will result in the most accurate CRP results. Some other lifestyle choices can help to improve CRP levels. Moderate consumption of alcohol has shown positive effects on CRP. Moderate consumption is equivalent to 1 bottle of beer, 2 glasses of wine, and 4 ounces of hard liquor. Drinking in excess of these amounts does not result in improved CRP levels. Good quality sleep also results in improved CRP levels. To improve your sleep, try going to bed earlier and sleeping in a completely dark room. Remember these key facts about CRP. CRP is a marker of inflammation. Inflammation should only be present when you are ill. Eat a wide variety of colorful fruits and vegetables. You can benefit from losing weight if you are overweight or obese.
Excellent. One of the key takeaways from that video for me was eating a variety of fruits and vegetables of various colors. That is definitely a key piece to longevity and reducing the risk for illness. Inflammation, from a chronic perspective, is definitely not healthy for you, but ways that we can counteract that is by sleeping sufficiently, at least 5 hours perhaps, in addition to eating lots of fruits and vegetables of various colors. White blood cells. So I'm at 6.4 thousand units per liter. White blood cells, also called leukocytes, are infection fighters in the immune system. Your white blood cell count is an indicator of inflammation throughout the body. High levels of white blood cells are associated with increased inflammation. People seem to be more vulnerable to colds and infections when their white blood cell count is somewhat high. So I'm not exactly high, which will be 10.8 units. I'm sorry, 10.8 thousands per unit, or I'm sorry, unit liter. I believe that's what UL stands for. But we see that high levels here, and I'm at 6.4. So not quite in the optimal zone, but this can be modified by various components here. So InsideTracker suggests that gut bacterial environments with a less diverse population of genes are strongly associated with elevated white blood cell counts. When white blood cell count is high, there is a higher risk of poor heart health in people who are otherwise healthy. Initial studies demonstrate a strong connection between one's gut microbiome, that is the bacterial environment in the intestines, and circulating white blood cell levels. Acute restrictions in sleep, even as little as one night with less than 4 hours of sleep, can significantly elevate white blood cell count. Insufficient sleep promotes low-level systemic inflammation. I can tell you, depending on what's going on, at times, we're encouraged to sacrifice our sleep in order to obtain certain goals in life. I can tell you that we might gain, from one end of it by achieving a goal, but on the back end of it, we'll have to consider what end of the candle we're burning. Generally, getting some rest at one time or another is important. And I'm actually speaking to the choir. I'm speaking to myself, as at times, I do work pretty hard and stay up late. But if I can reduce that piece, that can help with reducing that white blood cell count. In addition, looking at the gut microbiome, again, one key piece that I took away from these pointers is that it shows for white blood cell count, when it's high, there is a higher risk of poor heart health in people who are otherwise healthy. So, looking again at the surface of an individual, you'll see that there might be a lean physique, someone's ripped or cut, they're working out. But again, the InsideTracker results can give a peek at what's in. We could have, say, a 1971 Mustang that looks great on the outside. We can paint it up good and make it shiny, but the engine might not run well. It might only go but so far because the mechanics inside aren't working well. So it's good to look within so that you can get the best out of your own vehicle. So InsideTracker is one way to help make that assessment. So I'm a part of 16% of InsideTracker users who have normal level of white blood cells. This is a normal level, but according to what InsideTracker suggests, it considers that, between 6 to 3.8 is more optimal. There's also a video on white blood cells here. Let's take a look at what they have to say.
White blood cells, scientifically known as leukocytes, are one of the markers of inflammation in the body. Inflammation is the body's defense mechanism against infection and allergens. White blood cells are important for better health and quality of life. When this biomarker is optimized, you will have increased longevity, improved bone strength, and better zinc levels. When your white blood cell count is below the optimal zone, you are at risk of altered immune system function, which can lead to increased risk of infections and illness. When your white blood cell count is above the optimal zone, you are at risk of altered immune system function, reduced zinc levels, low bone mineral density, and upper respiratory infection after running. To improve your white blood cell count, you can improve your dietary choices, standardize your exercise regimen, and change your sleeping habits. Your white blood cell count is directly influenced by the quality of your diet. It is recommended that you eat more fruits and vegetables and less foods that are high in fat, salt, and sugar. Some foods and beverages that can improve your white blood cell count include soy, garlic, grapes, nuts, olive oil, vinegar, and black and green tea. Your exercise habits can affect your white blood cell count. More specifically, regular moderate intensity exercise optimizes your white blood cell count. When exercise is inconsistent, you may see negative effects on your white blood cell count. So, plan your exercise routine to get on a regular regimen. By modifying your diet and exercise habits, you can also lose weight. White blood cell counts improve with weight loss if you are overweight or obese. Your white blood cell count can also benefit from a good night's sleep. To improve your sleep, go to bed 30 minutes earlier and sleep in a completely dark room. Remember these key facts about white blood cells. White blood cells are a marker of good and bad inflammation, optimize levels, improve health and quality of life, make healthful diet and exercise choices, get better quality sleep by making modifications to your current habits.
Excellent. So there we are, some key points on white blood cells and things that we can do to help with keeping that regulated. A consistent theme here on sleep and inflammation. So now looking at the lipid group, for my lipid group, which is kind of comical, I feel it's kind of funny because I wouldn't think that my levels need work because I consider, you know, my exercise regimen and my diet to be very effective at keeping lipid levels from being elevated, but perhaps there might be some room for improvement. So let's take a look at some of the specifics here. Again, some of these common foods that suggest navy beans, white beans, wheat germ, other beans, etc. Perhaps I need to eat more beans. You know, the more beans you eat, I guess the more it helps your lipid levels. So incorporate at least 1 serving of nuts per day. I still do that. Nuts are high in monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats that help increase HDL cholesterol and decrease glucose. To increase your HDL cholesterol and lower your fasting glucose, consider taking, again, the garlic. Maybe I might try that. Increase your intake of beans. Okay, research has shown that 4 servings per week can improve HDL cholesterol. Use beans as a protein source in a meal at least once per week. To increase your HDL cholesterol and reduce your fasting blood glucose, consume 1 teaspoon of psyllium daily. And that's something that I've recently added back to my diet, but a very powerful additive to help with blood lipid control. So next, looking at total cholesterol, I'm definitely in the green zone here at 127 milligrams per deciliter. The interesting thing is this is actually the highest my cholesterol has ever been. It's usually like 115 milligrams per deciliter. Perhaps it's the bacon that I've been eating more consistently. But cholesterol is a waxy fat-like substance that is made in the body by the liver. Cholesterol forms part of every cell in the body and serves many vital functions, although it gets a bad rep. We do need it. It's a precursor for testosterone and also helps to support the bilipid membrane of cells. Normal levels of cholesterol are important for maintaining energy, active metabolism, and a healthy heart and circulatory system. If you're taking drugs, such as, I believe, Lipitor, of course, you know, consult with your doctor for further information, but I can recall, I believe that when you're taking it over time, it actually causes muscle breakdown. I think it may have something to do with, you know, the cholesterol that's within the muscle tissue, causing weakness over time. So if possible, you want to keep yourself healthy so that you can avoid the reliance upon these types of medications, which may cause long-term effects, and use diet to help lower cholesterol if you have elevated levels. 33% of InsideTracker users have an optimal level of cholesterol. Let's also take a look at this video here from InsideTracker on cholesterol.
Cholesterol is a waxy substance that participates in the function of all cells in the body. As a matter of fact, cholesterol helps to produce hormones and vitamin D. When cholesterol is optimized, you will have improved heart health, reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease. You will also have more energy and a healthier metabolism. When cholesterol is above the optimal zone, you're at a higher risk of having a heart attack or stroke. Nutrition plays a large role in keeping your cholesterol levels within the optimal range. To improve cholesterol levels, it is important to practice a healthful diet by properly substituting certain nutrients, more specifically, fats, and grains. Replace saturated and trans fat with unsaturated fat. Replace refined grains with whole grains. There are several foods you should add to your diet to optimize your cholesterol levels. These include oatmeal, fish, nuts, and olive oil. Regular exercise plays a large role in improving cholesterol levels. The American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology recommend participating in aerobic exercise at least 3 times a week for a minimum of 40 minutes. Additionally, if you are carrying around some excess weight, you may benefit from weight loss. By pursuing both nutrition and exercise habits that improve weight, people who are overweight will see improvements in their cholesterol levels. Cholesterol moves around the body in structures known as lipoproteins. There are a variety of lipoproteins. From largest to smallest, we have chylomicrons, VLDL, IDL, LDL, and HDL. Some are responsible for moving cholesterol out of the bloodstream, while others bring it into the bloodstream. To learn more about some of these lipoproteins, watch InsideTracker's biomarker videos on HDL and LDL. Remember these key facts about cholesterol. Cholesterol assists in the production of hormones. High cholesterol results in worsened heart health outcomes. There are healthy substitutions for saturated fat, trans fat, and refined carbohydrates. These include whole grains, fish, nuts, and oils.
Excellent. So there we have cholesterol, a marker that you definitely want to keep, down if it is elevated. It can have a major influence on risk for heart disease. Next, we have HDL. This is the good cholesterol, or what they call the cholesterol scavenger. It's the high-density lipoproteins are often referred to as HDL or good cholesterol. They act as cholesterol scavengers, picking up excess cholesterol in your blood and taking it back to your liver where it's broken down. If your levels of HDL are low, you may be at greater risk of poor heart health. So I'm below the optimal zone, which is between 67 to 200, which is kind of crazy. I think elevating your HDL level can be extremely hard, but there might be some foods or different tips that InsideTracker has. Generally, I'm a part of 46% of InsideTracker users who have a normal level. It's still a normal level, but to get it optimal, you should be between 67 to 200. What kind of tips and suggestions do they have? Let's take a look.
HDL removes cholesterol from the body and transports it to the liver, which is the only place where you can remove cholesterol from the body. Because of this capability, it is desirable to have high HDL. When it is optimized, heart disease outcomes improve. HDL also plays a role in improved energy and metabolism. When HDL is below the optimized zone, you're at a higher risk of having a heart attack or stroke. Food plays a large role in keeping your HDL levels within the optimal range. To improve HDL levels, it is important to practice a healthful diet by properly substituting certain nutrients, more specifically fats and grains. Replace saturated and trans fat with unsaturated fat. Replace refined grains with whole grains. Some foods that improve HDL are oatmeal, fish, beans, and nuts. To increase your HDL, it is important to decrease your LDL. In order to do that, you should increase your weekly physical activity. The American Heart Association and the American College of Cardiology recommend 40 minutes of aerobic exercise 3 times per week. If you are overweight, you should also try to lose weight through diet and exercise. This will help to optimize your HDL as well as decrease LDL and total cholesterol. Remember these key facts about HDL. Keep HDL high. HDL removes cholesterol from the blood vessels. Eat whole grains and healthy fats.
Excellent. So there we have HDL levels. Again, an important marker to help with reducing risk for heart disease. We hear a common theme amongst many of the tips and suggestions: eating more fish, beans, oatmeal, whole grains, and weight loss. Those are the principles to help support good health. And those reasons are because of some of these particular markers in the blood, such as HDL levels, that can have an influence on your health for the long term. Now looking at LDL, this is more known as the bad cholesterol levels. And we see that for my level, I'm in the optimal zone at 59 milligrams per deciliter. LDL carry cholesterol throughout the body, delivering it to different organs and tissues. LDL is often referred to as bad cholesterol because it deposits excess LDL called plaques around the blood vessels, and that may narrow blood vessels and constrict blood flow. Optimal levels of LDL correlate with increased energy, improved metabolism, and better heart health. There are only 9% of InsideTracker users who have achieved their optimal level of LDL. I do feel that my diet is very sufficient in fruits, vegetables, exercise, fatty fish, which can help to improve this particular marker. Let's see what InsideTracker doesn't have anything to say. They have a video, but I think we've covered enough on that one. Now, looking at triglycerides, fats for energy storage, that's your glycerol backbone and your 3 long chain fatty acids. My levels were at 42 milligrams per deciliter, again in the optimal zone. Triglycerides are a type of lipid found in your blood. Triglycerides are present in some foods, and your body also makes them. When you eat, your body converts any calories it doesn't need to use right away into triglycerides. This is fat. This is what's stored in your body. This is what we're aiming to break down with weight loss. Later, hormones release triglycerides for energy between meals. And this is a very energy-rich source of a molecule that can provide energy for long periods of time during, say, starvation, or perhaps during times of famine, or during times when we may not have meals, etc. So adequate levels of triglycerides are important for maintaining energy, improving metabolism, and promoting heart health. There's an unlimited ability for the body to store triglycerides, which is why we often see morbid obesity. But things like protein, it's not a nutrient that's stored. Your lean body mass, your lean tissue, you don't see like excessively large individuals. I mean, outside of steroids, of course. But triglycerides, fats, that's the energy source that we want to try to keep moderate, and choosing the right fats as well, in addition to doing plenty of exercise to keep excessive energy from being stored in this triglyceride format. So let's take a look at what InsideTracker has to say about triglycerides.
Triglycerides are fats that are found in food and produced in the body. When there is limited blood glucose available, triglycerides will be used for fuel. It is essential to optimize your triglyceride levels to have increased energy, improved metabolism, and reduced cardiovascular disease risk. When triglycerides are above the optimal zone, you are at risk of higher fasting blood glucose, higher body weight, atherosclerosis, and cardiovascular disease, which includes both heart attack and stroke. To optimize your triglyceride levels, you can modify your diet, increase your weekly physical activity, or lose weight. There are a wide variety of foods that you can add to your diet to improve your triglyceride levels. Some foods include whole grains, fish, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. Just as there are important foods to add, there are also some foods that you should remove from your diet. Limit refined carbohydrates and alcohol. Make sure to be mindful of the quantity of food that you are consuming. Excess calorie intake leads to increased production of triglycerides in the body. The more physical activity you participate in, the better it is for your triglyceride levels. So, try to get on a regular exercise regimen. Remember these key facts about triglycerides. Triglycerides are the second preferred fuel source. You can improve your energy and metabolism by optimizing levels. Avoid eating excess calories. Add physical activity to your weekly routine.
Excellent. So there we have triglycerides, the second primary source of energy by the body. First, again, is carbohydrates, and the last being protein. So what we see next is liver enzymes group. Gives an indication for liver function and toxicity. Well, it looks like my levels need work. Uh-oh, is my liver deteriorating? Am I taking too many supplements? I don't think so. Let's take a closer look at this one. So because your AST is above normal, consult with your doctor. We'll find out a little bit more about this marker and why it might be elevated to get a better understanding of why it might be slightly elevated here. What things can you do nutritionally to reduce this particular level from increasing? Increase your consumption of nuts to at least 1 serving per day. Nuts are high in vitamin E, which has been shown to reduce levels of liver enzymes. That one got 5 stars. I eat nuts every day. To reduce ALT and AST, restructure your exercise to avoid excessive muscle damage. This is where it comes into play for me. Reduce frequency, intensity, or duration of your training, or change your exercise type. This I don't necessarily agree with. Obviously, I'm working out hard. I'm doing high intensity resistance training. That's going to break down more muscle tissue, which is going to leak out these liver enzyme markers, which is going to cause those levels to be elevated. That's why my levels are high. It's the same thing, if you work out, there are certain parameters your body is going to go through to make those changes. And at times, some of these markers are based on the general population versus those who are physically active. So it's just a baseline based upon my daily exercise routine. Another suggestion is to take a probiotic supplement daily to help reduce these levels. And this is something that I've added back into my diet. I do use a prebiotic, probiotic, digestive enzyme-based supplement, which is excellent. That helps with controlling these levels. What else do we have? Looking at ALT, another liver enzyme marker, we see that my level is 29 units per liter, which is elevated. It should be between 9 to 21. ALT is an enzyme primarily found in the liver that helps chemical reactions occur. It plays a role in changing stored glucose into usable energy. When there is liver damage or disease, then ALT enters the bloodstream. There is normally a small amount of ALT in the blood. Higher amounts of ALT in the blood typically indicate liver damage or disease. Possible causes of liver damage or disease include drinking, heart failure, obesity, cirrhosis, and hepatitis caused by alcohol, drugs, or viruses. Some cholesterol lowering medications and some over-the-counter pain medications can also damage the liver and thus cause ALT to increase. Damage to your liver can result in fatigue, loss of appetite, nausea, and weight loss. Your liver has some ability to regrow after injury and damage, so it's important to take action that will help your liver repair itself. After exercise, AST and creatine kinase both rise over the same time period, while increases in ALT take significantly longer. So ALT values greater than 20 to 25 significantly increase the risk of developing unstable blood sugar levels. The greatest increase in risk is found with 25 to 40 units per liter of ALT. Higher ALT levels increase the risk of developing high fasting blood glucose levels. To reduce the risk of unstable blood sugar levels and poor metabolic health, men should keep the ALT levels below 22 units per liter. Daily coffee consumption appears to protect the liver from damage. That's something I do. I'm actually got some coffee right in front of me. Habitual coffee drinkers have reduced risk of elevated ALT and GGT. ALT levels increase in response to exercise that causes muscle damage. Again, if you guys watch my videos, you know I work out like a beast. So that's why these levels are elevated. There's no reason to be of concern because of some type of medications or drugs or alcohol. None of that applies here. If you have taken acetaminophen for an extended period, which I haven't taken in like who knows how long, it may lead to increased ALT levels. Ceasing or reducing Tylenol intake can help modestly reduce ALT levels in some individuals. Nothing to be alarmed about, folks. I'm a part of 43% of InsideTracker users who have a normal level of ALT. 49% have optimal levels. AST, whoa, 54, red, watch out. Another liver enzyme that's elevated. Again, not to repeat the same thing, but it's basically because of exercise. Note the first bullet. After exercise, AST and creatine kinase both rise over the same time period, while increases in ALT take significantly longer. The timeline of post-exercise elevations in AST and creatine kinase are fairly similar, while elevations in ALT take significantly longer. So, not going to get too much into the details of this one here, but exercise is the reason. And I'm a part of 9% of InsideTracker users who have a higher AST level. How about GGT, gamma glutamyl transpeptidase? Is an enzyme that is concentrated in the liver and is also found in the bile ducts, pancreas, spleen, kidneys. GGT helps to transfer amino acids across the cell membrane, and it plays an important role in helping the liver metabolize toxins. Increased levels of GGT can indicate disease or damage to the liver, bile ducts, or pancreas. Optimal levels of GGT will help increase your energy endurance as well as improve your digestive health. After exercise, AST and creatine kinase both rise over time. Same thing. But if you see that just GGTs increase, then I think we have a problem. But thank God I'm in the optimal zone. You won't know unless you have your levels checked. InsideTracker helps you get it done and gives you insight into what it is. Be a smart consumer. Check your engine. Know what's happening to run most optimally. Albumin, made by the liver. Albumin constitutes about half of the protein in the serum, clear part of the blood. This protein transports many molecules, including thyroid and fat-soluble hormones, fatty acids, and calcium through the blood. Testosterone is one of the most important molecules transported by albumin. Half of the testosterone in the body is bound to albumin, as with sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG. When testosterone is bound to albumin, it is biologically inactive. However, testosterone, when bound to albumin, is less inactive than testosterone bound to SHBG because the affinity is much weaker compared to SHBG. So what does that mean? Basically, what it's trying to say is that albumin attaches to testosterone, but not as much as the sex hormone binding globulin, the SHBG. So if you have high levels of SHBG, that means that you have a greater affinity or a greater likelihood to bind to free testosterone, which could potentially be good because you don't want them to be too elevated, where high testosterone levels are associated with the risk for prostate cancer, but you also don't want to be too low, where you hear the concept of low T, where it could be affecting your energy, power output, and your manly aggressiveness. But we'll take a look at some of that in a minute. But my albumin levels are normal. We know in the hospital setting, albumin used to be used as a marker for malnutrition. It can give some indications for, say, pre-surgical risk factors, but really it's not a marker for malnutrition anymore. The new Aspen guidelines does not even include or talk about albumin. We want to use those other 6 parameters for malnutrition. Look at body weight change, look at body composition change, any fluid accumulation, edema, look at hand grip strength changes, which is one of my favorite markers for malnutrition. In addition, looking at total food intake, 24-hour recall, and loss of appetite, I believe. So no albumin, folks, no albumin for malnutrition. Total iron binding capacity. Here we are again. Looks like I'm a little low here. Something is up with this iron, man. Someone help me out here. What's happening? So I'm at 283 micrograms per deciliter. This again, recommending these foods. I already eat them. And I'm a part of 39% of InsideTracker users who have a normal level of TIBC. So what is this about? TIBC, total iron binding capacity, measures the maximum amount of iron your blood can carry. Yes. The human body requires iron to perform many vital physiological functions. We already kind of talked about this. Your body takes in iron from food you eat, so it's important to have good sources of iron. Yep. And we basically talked about this. So transferrin also prevents iron from causing damage in the body by catalyzing the production of free radicals. Okay. So looking at creatine kinase, this is another one of those markers of muscle damage from working out. I remember one time a friend told me her creatine kinase levels were like through the roof, and she had just started working out, and her doctor like freaked out, thought she was having a heart attack or something. Well, it wasn't that serious. She just started a new workout regimen. But ultimately, here we see that when lifting to muscular failure, shorter rest intervals may cause greater increases in CK despite larger loads, weight times reps, being possible than with longer rest intervals. To reduce creatine kinase levels, modify your workouts to reduce the number of eccentric contractions when the muscle lengthens under tension. So say like when you're doing a bicep curl, the part where you're flexing, that's called contraction. But when you're letting the weight down and extending your arm to the elongation, that's where the eccentric contraction comes into play. That's where you get more muscle damage. That's actually what causes muscle growth. It's not the concentric contraction, it's the eccentric contraction. And studies suggest that you should actually try to move quickly through the eccentric contraction in order to cause more muscle damage. That's actually what you want if you're trying to build your muscle and increase lean body mass gains. But if you see an elevated CK, don't get alarmed. It's just damage done from the great growth you'll see from the physical activity regimen that you're putting in. Testosterone group. Sexual function and athletic performance. Needs work. Really? Come on now. It's suggesting that salmon, pollock, wheat germ, grouper, lobster are all foods that help. I'm going to Red Lobster tomorrow. Salmon I eat probably at least twice a week. To minimize elevations of sex hormone binding globulin during caloric restriction, consume at least 159 grams of protein each day. I have no problem with that. To help combat your high sex hormone binding globulin levels and improve your testosterone group, reduce weekly training loads and/or implement a short sedentary rest period. To reduce the risk of elevations in SHBG when restricting calories, reduce your total caloric intake by no more than 400 calories per day. Interesting. To improve testosterone group levels, try substituting interval training for 1 or 2 steady state training sessions per week. Maybe I'm doing too much high intensity. Now looking at free testosterone, I'm in the optimal zone at 617 nanograms per deciliter. Testosterone is a steroid hormone that is essential to overall health, sexual function, and athletic performance. Both men and women produce testosterone. Women normally have very small amounts of this hormone. Optimal testosterone levels are important to athletic performance. Testosterone builds muscle, improves strength, and increases the body's capacity to use oxygen during exercise. In men, testosterone strengthens bone and prevents age-related bone loss. Regular exercise has been shown to increase testosterone levels. Recent studies have suggested that adequate levels of magnesium help support healthy testosterone levels. Let's see what video we don't have on here, but I think I gave you a little insight on testosterone there. Vitamin D, the big D. Everybody wants to know about what the vitamin D levels are. It's a very important nutrient, probably the most important marker that I can discuss here. One thing that jumps right to mind is that I've noticed a study or two suggesting that very low levels of vitamin D may be associated with increased risk for colorectal cancer. Get your vitamin D levels checked, especially if you have darker skin. You don't produce as much vitamin D from sunlight exposure. Also, if you're not eating these foods that are listed like halibut, carp, eel, yuck, whitefish, snapper, foods are not going to really give you an adequate amount anyway. So many practitioners are suggesting supplementing with like 1,000 units per day. So my levels are at 40 nanograms per milliliter, which is right above the optimal level. Hopefully they're still there. It's summertime, so I'm producing some from the sunlight. But let's get a little bit more insight from vitamin D from InsideTracker.
Vitamin D is an essential micronutrient with a variety of functions in the body. For example, it helps to improve bone health, which reduces the long-term risk of osteoporosis. Vitamin D also helps to prevent illness, to maintain a healthy weight, to improve longevity, and to strengthen your muscles so that you are less likely to have muscle injuries. When vitamin D is below the optimal zone, you're at risk of low calcium, stress fractures, inflammation, and low energy. When vitamin D is above the optimal zone, you're at risk of excess calcium, poor appetite, increased urination, arrhythmia, and decreased longevity. When you are trying to optimize vitamin D, you have several options. If your vitamin D is low, you can slightly increase your sun exposure, eat more foods rich in vitamin D, or take a vitamin D supplement. If your vitamin D is high, you may want to adjust your vitamin D intake. The amount of vitamin D that your body gets from the sun depends on how long you are in the sun and on your skin coloration. Darker skin absorbs less vitamin D. Be mindful about the amount of sun exposure you get. Too much can increase your risk of skin cancer. Good food sources of vitamin D include fatty deep sea fish, such as salmon, swordfish, and tuna, UV-exposed mushrooms, and fortified foods, including dairy products and cereal. Most InsideTracker users want to increase their vitamin D levels. Because it can be difficult to get optimal amounts of vitamin D from food and sun exposure, you may want to consider taking vitamin D supplements. If you do, be aware of how much vitamin D you are consuming. Just as low vitamin D is not ideal, excess vitamin D can cause health issues. Remember these key facts about vitamin D. It is vital to bone and body health. Appropriate amounts of sun exposure are important. Some foods are good sources of vitamin D. Consider taking vitamin D supplements if you are not getting enough through sun exposure and food.
Excellent. So there we have vitamin D. Again, a very important fat-soluble vitamin. Don't forget to take with food to enhance absorption. It is important for bone health, muscle function, and many other physiological parameters. Ferritin. Let's take a look at what we have here. So ferritin is a marker for your iron storage. And apparently I'm right at 60 nanograms per milliliter. Dark chocolate, wheat germ, winged, whatever, beans, spinach, mussels are ways to improve that parameter. And there's more information that InsideTracker can provide. Get your levels checked so that you know where you stand. Cortisol, everyone heard about this one, the stress hormone, the one that can have an influence on that abdominal fat accumulation, is not good. And I was actually very curious to see where my cortisol level was at. I actually had a back injury, and it's still actually present for like the past year. And I was thinking maybe my stress levels, cortisol levels might be elevated because of it. But it's nice to know that I'm in the optimal zone and there's not necessarily anything significant internally that may be happening. Of course, X-ray was negative. Ultimately here, it indicates that I'm in a normal level as a rower to prevent changes to daily cortisol profiles that result from inadequate sleep. Ensure regular adequate sleep, more than 6 hours per night. So that could be a big factor for cortisol accumulation. Okay, vitamin B12, my levels were actually high. I eat a lot of vitamin B12 rich foods such as beef. I don't eat this macro and these other things, but if I were to flip to the right, animal-based protein foods are going to be your primary source of vitamin B12. B12 is necessary to help reduce what's known as macrocytic anemia. It's a component of supporting red blood cell function, energy production, and muscle repair. Let's take a look at what InsideTracker has to say about B12.
Vitamin B12 is important to all cells in the body. More specifically, it assists in red blood cell production. Vitamin B12 deficiency can cause a type of anemia in which red blood cells become larger, medically referred to as megaloblastic anemia. This has negative effects on your overall health. It is important to understand that your absorption of vitamin B12 declines with age. So, as you get older, you're at a higher risk of B12-related anemia. Optimal vitamin B12 has been associated with improved athletic performance, specifically during high-intensity workouts, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, and increased longevity. When vitamin B12 levels are below the optimal zone, you are at risk of canker sores, irritability, depression, memory impairment, poor coordination, and, as previously mentioned, megaloblastic anemia. When vitamin B12 levels are above the optimal zone, you are at risk of skin rashes, headaches, nausea, chest discomfort, dysphagia, which is a difficulty with swallowing, and immune response impairment. When you're trying to optimize your vitamin B12 levels, you need to be aware of your intake of vitamin B12. Natural food sources of vitamin B12 are only found in animal products. These include beef, shellfish, fish, chicken, and cheese. If you do not eat animal products, you may want to consider eating foods that are fortified with B12. These include cereals and protein substitutes. Be aware that energy bars and energy drinks are fortified with B12. If your B12 levels are too high, you might want to eat less of these foods. If you are not getting enough vitamin B12 from natural and fortified foods, you may want to consider supplementation. Since you only need a small amount, make sure that you are not supplementing too much. Remember these key facts about vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is essential to red blood cells. When it is low, you can develop megaloblastic anemia. All of the natural vitamin B12 food sources are animal products. If you are a vegetarian or vegan, you may want to consider supplementation.
So there we have vitamin B12, some very important tips there, and a nutrient that is essential to make sure that it is adequate. If you're following a vegetarian diet, the likelihood of vitamin B12 deficiency is higher. However, if you are choosing some of those protein-based foods, your B12 levels may be adequate. But again, how would you know if you don't test your levels? So next up, we have sodium. Maintains fluid balance. Everyone's always concerned about salt. It gets more of a bad rep, and particularly around its use for cardiovascular disease. Reason being is because sodium holds on to water, and that can increase the blood pressure, increasing the risk for a potential thrombosis, a cardiovascular event. So generally, for those that have cardiac risk, you might want to keep your sodium levels down. But otherwise, if you're an athlete, it's the opposite. You actually need significant amount of sodium, especially if you're an endurance runner, long distance runner, working out in the heat, etc. Here, my level was in the optimal zone. There's a list of some fruits and some oils that may have a higher concentration of sodium. Generally, the risk of dehydration increases dramatically in hot weather. The summertime, football training camp, make sure you're staying hydrated. Hydration includes adding sodium to your foods and beverages as well. Why do you think Gatorade includes sodium? Helps encourage fluid intake and also helps support with blood perfusion and reducing the risk for dehydration. So ultimately, proper hydration before, during, and after exercise in hot, humid environments is critical. Now, water is important, but too much of anything isn't good for you. And there's something called hyponatremia, which is low blood sodium levels, which can cause muscle cramping. So drink water, but also include, again, those sodium-rich foods like pretzels, soups, pickle juice. Take the salt shaker and add some extra salt on your food, and that can help with supporting performance. After exercise, it's important to replace the water loss in sweat. 16 to 24 ounces of water should be consumed for every pound of body weight lost during exercise. During exercise, sodium and potassium are lost through sweat. Be sure to replenish sodium and potassium during workouts, lasting longer than 1 hour and after exercise. Males should consume at least 120 fluid ounces of water per day. Additionally, water should be consumed for losses due to exercise. And I think there's a little video on sodium. Let's run this.
Sodium is an electrolyte which assists in cell-to-cell communication. Sodium is essential to every cell in the body. It is present in cells, in between cells, and in the fluid surrounding cells. Sodium is essential for the maintenance of normal blood pressure. It also helps with the maintenance of mineral and fluid balance. When sodium is below the optimal zone, you're at risk of altered heart function, impaired kidney function, breakdown of muscle fibers, coma, and death. It is very uncommon to have low sodium. The current recommendation for sodium is less than 1,500 milligrams per day, but the average American consumes 3,500 milligrams per day, more than double the recommendation. When sodium is above the optimal zone, you're at risk of high blood pressure, elevated fasting blood glucose, muscle weakness, and cardiovascular disease. To optimize your sodium levels, you should be mindful of the amount of sodium in your diet and added to your beverages during your long, intense workouts. For controlling your sodium levels, it is important to reduce the number of high sodium foods in your diet. These are foods that typically have a longer shelf life because the added salt is used as a preservative. High salt foods include prepared soup, deli meat, hot dogs, and canned foods. During exercise, you lose sodium in your sweat, so it is important to add sodium and other electrolytes to your water when you exercise. Now, this doesn't apply to all workouts. According to the American College of Sports Medicine, you only need to add electrolytes to water when your exercise routine lasts more than 1 hour. Remember these key facts about sodium. Sodium is one of several electrolytes that participates in cell-to-cell communication. Sodium levels directly influence blood pressure. Reduce the number of high sodium foods in your diet. After 1 hour of exercise, add electrolytes to your water.
Excellent. So there we have sodium and some tips of consideration. Always a tricky and confusing one as far as whether to increase or decrease, especially if you're an exercising individual. Potassium, it's the cousin to sodium, and it is a blood pressure regulator. Has less of an influence for regulating that, risk for cramps and hydration. Ultimately, in a optimal level, you can find potassium in potatoes, grouper, wheat germ, salmon, and we note that it does mention some of the same parameters on the sodium slide. And let's see what the InsideTracker video has to say, or maybe not. Ultimately, potassium is less of a concern for individuals unless you have risk for kidney disease or you have kidney disease. You want to keep those potassium levels from being elevated because then that's where you have issues that can affect cardiovascular function. Magnesium. Looks like I'm right at the optimal zone. I can consume more salmon. I don't know if that's going to really help because I feel like I ate enough of it. Perhaps a multivitamin if I like. Some wheat germ. That one keeps coming up, which is why I added it to my diet actually. So it'll be interesting to see if this went up. And that's magnesium. Calcium. These are all the minerals. Again, these are hard to go deficient in. They're usually pretty abundant in the diet if you're choosing these foods. Obviously, dairy is very abundant around us. It's a matter of if you would prefer to select these types of foods or not in your diet. If not, of course, supplementing would be essential. Generally, though, we think of calcium for bone health, and really bone mineralization occurs in the teenage years. So if you have someone between the age of 14 to 18, we really want to make sure that they're getting calcium-rich foods to solidify bone mineral density. Generally, my calcium levels are adequate at 9.5 milligrams per deciliter. And we have a little video again on calcium.
Calcium is a mineral that works in the body with vitamin D. The adequate consumption of these two micronutrients is essential because vitamin D assists in the absorption of calcium. As a biomarker, calcium helps to maintain peak bone mass, which can decrease the likelihood of developing osteoporosis. It is also important for repairing muscle tissue, increasing muscle mass, decreasing insulin resistance, and maintaining a healthy blood pressure so that you are less likely to get hypertension. When calcium is below the optimal zone, you're at an increased risk of bone fractures, specifically at the hip, stress fractures, and high blood pressure. When calcium is above the optimal zone, you are at an increased risk of forming calcium deposits. These can occur in the arteries, veins, and kidneys, where they are found as kidney stones. When you are trying to optimize calcium, you have two options. You can increase your intake of calcium-rich foods, And if that is not enough, you can add in a calcium supplement. Good food sources of calcium are primarily dairy products, including low-fat milk, yogurt, and cheese. Other foods contain calcium as well, but in much lesser amounts. Some of these foods include dark green vegetables such as kale and broccoli, oranges, tofu with calcium sulfate, and canned sardines and salmon. It can be difficult to get optimal amounts of calcium, especially if you do not consume dairy products. If this describes you, you may want to consider supplementing calcium. Most supplement doses should be divided into 2 different time points during the day for better absorption. As with any other supplement, you need to be mindful about the amount of calcium you are consuming. There are certain demographic and modifiable factors that reduce the absorption of calcium. These factors include increased age, consumption of caffeine, and consumption of alcohol. Foods containing oxalic acid bind to calcium and limit its absorption. These foods are often calcium rich, like spinach and beans, so make sure to account for these when trying to consume adequate amounts of calcium from food and/or supplements. Remember these key facts about calcium. Calcium and vitamin D work together. Dairy products are an excellent source of calcium. Non-dairy calcium sources do exist. Supplementation is an option, especially if you do not consume enough calcium.
Excellent. There we have calcium, a mineral that we often hear about. It's something essential to the body, needed for many metabolic functions and bone health. Where do you get your calcium from? Make sure that it's adequate and have your levels checked to reduce the risk for deficiencies, fractures, and failures. Folate, this is something that no one should be deficient in, considering that the United States government has fortified many of our foods with folic acid. Reason being is because when you have folic acid deficiency, that's when you have a higher risk of developing one of the birth defects known as spina bifida, which is a malfunction in the brain and spinal cord development. And the folate has a high relation to supporting the replication of cells, and particularly with DNA support or DNA translation. So cell replication, when we think about folate, its function in our bloodstream as adults is to support the red blood cell, and particularly when you have a folic acid deficiency, it leads to, I believe, folic acid deficiency, I believe, leads to macrocytic anemia as well. So it's important to keep an adequate amount. But as mentioned many times, foods are fortified with folic acid. And you can get your folic acid from things like spinach, which is pretty abundant, and hopefully something that you're consuming in your diet. All right. Now looking at the testosterone cortisol ratio, for me, I was at 66 units, which apparently is optimal or right below optimization. It can give an indication for overtraining and stress if the level is low. To improve testosterone cortisol ratio, avoid rapid increases in training load, volume, and intensity, and prolonged heavy training periods without rest. To help raise testosterone levels naturally and improve the testosterone to cortisol ratio, lose weight. To increase testosterone levels and to improve the testosterone to cortisol ratio, get adequate amounts of sleep. To decrease stress, to lower cortisol levels, and to improve the testosterone to cortisol ratio, practice stress management techniques. FT to cortisol ratio, free testosterone to cortisol ratio. As an athlete who trains frequently, reduce training volume and intensity. Taper period to improve in exercise-induced decline in free testosterone to cortisol ratio. To increase free testosterone levels, to improve the free testosterone to cortisol ratio, get adequate amounts of sleep. I think I'm sleepy, folks. 61 units per 61 units. It should be between 67 to 100. So that's that. The last thing I want to share with you is the inner age portion of the InsideTracker results. This one was definitely a shocker. Again, is looking at how you look, how you feel versus what's actually occurring within. My real chronological age at the time of this test was 32.6. My test showed that I was 33.1 for inner age based upon this equation. these individuals that put this whole system together are like MIT graduates and doctors and people that are way smarter than me. So it's very insightful to obtain a test of this nature. So yeah, looks like I need some work here for my inner age, and they gave me some foods that I should choose on a more frequent basis. Blackberries, I swear, I eat those like crazy. I love blackberries. Butternut squash is something I haven't eaten much, that I can add more. Turnip greens, navy beans again. I'm going to buy some navy beans tomorrow. And avocados, I vow to eat at least once a week. All right, that's what we have, folks. InsideTracker, you can get your test results done, and you can save, I believe, 10%. That's a typo. 10% with code JamesLucas10. As a matter of fact, let me change that here. 10% off, folks, with code JamesLucas10. You can choose the ultimate plan, which is the one that I did, where you can get 41 total biomarkers, inner age assessment, and it checks all those parameters that I mentioned. This could be a small value when you're looking at the internal components of your health and how it can influence your wellness and your longevity. We're looking to optimize on our athletic performance, our opportunities that life presents us with. And we only will know how far we can go if we have the right mechanics and fuel to keep us running along the road that we're destined to go upon. So get your test done, invest, make that ultimate investment in your health to take control of your destiny. So use my code, JamesLucas10, to get 10% off your plan. Share your results with me. Let me know how things are going. Let me assist you. Ask me any questions that you might have in relation to your nutrition plans. This is JLucas Nutrition and Exercise Services signing off. Make the right nutrition choices today to influence your health for tomorrow.